Where do we come from? Science says evolution. Religion says divine creation. But what if both are wrong? What if the true origin of humanity is something so shocking, so carefully hidden, that discovering it changes everything you thought you knew about what it means to be human? The story I'm about to share is not a theory. It's not speculation. It's what one man witnessed with his own eyes when a being from another world showed him the actual moment the first human came into existence. And what he saw shattered every assumption he had ever made about God, about evolution, and about why we are really here on this planet. I must warn you, this truth is not comfortable. It will challenge your religious beliefs. It will challenge your scientific beliefs. It will make you question whether the life you're living is the life you were designed for. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And you may never look at yourself the same way again. If you've ever felt that something about the human story doesn't add up, that we don't quite belong here, that there's a purpose to our existence that no one has been able to explain, this story will give you answers that have been suppressed for thousands of years. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what Raymond Torres experienced in the Arizona desert will reveal why humanity's true origin has been the most guarded secret in history. Now let me tell you how it all began. Sedona, Arizona, October 15th, 4:23 a.m. Raymond Torres couldn't sleep, again. He lay in the narrow bed of his rented cabin, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the desert night. At 58, he had grown used to insomnia. It had been his companion for the past 2 years, ever since the accident that took his son and left his faith in ruins. He got up and walked to the window. The red rocks of Sedona were invisible in the darkness, but he knew they were there. Massive formations that had drawn him to this place, though he couldn't explain exactly why. Something about them felt ancient, important, like they were waiting to tell him something. Raymond had been a biology teacher for 31 years, high school. 3 decades of standing in front of teenagers, explaining evolution, natural selection, the slow march of species from single cells to complex organisms. He had believed it completely. The evidence was overwhelming. The fossil record, DNA analysis, the beautiful, logical progression of life adapting to its environment over billions of years. He had argued with creationists, debated religious parents who didn't want their children learning that humans descended from apes. He had been patient, but firm. Science was science. Facts were facts. And the fact was that humanity had evolved through random mutation and natural selection, just like every other species on this planet. Then his son died, and facts stopped mattering. Michael was 24, bright, funny, just starting his career as a marine biologist. He had inherited his father's love of science, his curiosity about the natural world. They would spend hours discussing evolutionary theory, comparing notes on their respective fields. The drunk driver ran a red light at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Michael died on impact. The driver walked away with minor injuries. Raymond remembered getting the call, remembered driving to the hospital, remembered standing in the morgue, looking at his son's body, and feeling something fundamental break inside him. In the months that followed, he tried to find comfort in his scientific worldview. Michael's consciousness was simply a product of neural activity. When the brain stopped functioning, consciousness ceased to exist. There was no soul, no afterlife, no continuation. Michael was gone, completely, permanently. Just atoms that had briefly organized themselves into a pattern called a person, now dispersing back into the universe. It should have been comforting. It was what he had believed his entire adult life, but standing over his son's grave, Raymond couldn't make himself accept it, because something in him knew that Michael was more than atoms, more than neural patterns, more than a random collection of evolved traits. Something in him screamed that consciousness couldn't just end, that the love he felt for his son couldn't simply cease to exist because a drunk driver ran a red light. He started questioning everything, not just death and consciousness, but the entire framework of his understanding. Evolution explained how bodies changed over time, but did it really explain consciousness? Did it explain why humans asked questions about meaning and purpose? Did it explain art, music, love, the persistent human intuition that there was something more to existence than physical matter? Raymond took a leave of absence from teaching. He couldn't stand in front of students and teach evolution as absolute truth when he no longer knew what he believed. He started reading, not just science, but philosophy, spirituality, ancient texts, alternative theories about human origins that his scientific training had taught him to dismiss. He found himself drawn to the anomalies, archaeological sites that didn't fit the standard timeline, ancient structures that seemed to require technology humans supposedly didn't possess, myths from every culture describing beings from the sky who created or modified humanity. His colleagues thought he was having a breakdown. Maybe he was, but he couldn't stop searching, couldn't stop feeling that the story he had been taught about human origins was incomplete, that something crucial had been left out. That was what brought him to Sedona. The area was famous for what believers called vortexes, energy centers where the veil between dimensions was supposedly thin. Raymond didn't know if he believed in vortexes, but he believed in the feeling that had drawn him here, the sense that answers were waiting in this red desert. He had been here for 2 weeks, hiking during the day, reading at night, waiting for something he couldn't name. Now, standing at the window in the darkness before dawn, he felt it. A pull, an urge to go outside that was almost physical in its intensity. He dressed quickly. Jeans, hiking boots, a jacket against the cold desert night. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the cabin. The stars were overwhelming. Without city lights to dim them, they filled the sky in numbers he had forgotten were possible. Raymond stood for a moment, staring upward, feeling small and vast at the same time. The pull came again, stronger now, drawing him toward the trail that led into the rock formations north of the cabin. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself, hiking in the dark because of a feeling. But his feet were already moving, following the trail by flashlight, climbing steadily into the rocks. His rational mind screamed at him to turn back. His rational mind had been screaming for 2 years, and he had stopped listening. 20 minutes into the hike, he saw the light. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't a campfire. It was a soft, blue-white glow emanating from somewhere ahead, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Raymond stopped. His own heart was pounding now. Every instinct told him to run, but the pull was stronger than the fear. He moved toward the light, and what he found in that hidden canyon among the red rocks of Sedona would answer questions he had been asking for 2 years, questions he had been asking his entire life without knowing it, questions about where humanity really came from and why that truth had been hidden from the very beginning. The canyon opened up before him like a wound in the earth. Steep walls of red rock rose on either side, and at the center, the source of the light became clear. A craft. There was no other word for it. Roughly oval in shape, maybe 40 feet across, hovering 3 feet above the ground without any visible means of support. The blue-white glow emanated from its surface, pulsing in that steady rhythm he had seen from a distance. Raymond's flashlight slipped from his fingers. He didn't notice. "This isn't real," he whispered. "I'm dreaming. I'm finally having the breakdown everyone said was coming." But the cold night air was real. The rock beneath his boots was real, and the figure now emerging from the craft was real in ways that made his knees buckle. It was humanoid, tall and slender, perhaps 7 feet, skin that seemed to shift between silver and pale blue in the light from the craft, large eyes, dark and deep, reflecting the stars overhead. It moved with a fluid grace that was beautiful and terrifying. Raymond tried to run. His body refused. He stood frozen, watching the being approach, every cell screaming danger while something deeper whispered, "Wait." The being stopped 10 feet away, and then a voice filled Raymond's mind, not his ears, his mind, clear and calm like thought itself given sound. "Do not be afraid, Raymond Torres. You have been calling us for 2 years. We have finally answered." "Calling you?" Raymond's voice came out cracked. "I haven't called anyone. I don't even know what you are." "You have been asking questions, searching for truth about origins, about consciousness, about what your son became when his body ceased to function. These questions create a frequency, a signal. We heard it and came." Raymond felt tears burn his eyes at the mention of Michael. "What do you know about my son?" "We know that consciousness does not end with physical death. We know that your son still exists, though not in a form you can currently perceive. And we know that your grief has opened you to truths you would never have accepted before. Who are you? Where do you come from? We are what you would call observers, guides. We have been connected to your species since its beginning. We come from a system your astronomers call Lyra, though we have not lived there for many thousands of your years. Raymond's scientific mind struggled to process this. Lyra, a constellation, light years away, and yet this being stood before him, speaking inside his head, claiming a connection to humanity that spanned millennia. Why are you here? Why now? Why me? Because the time has come for certain truths to be revealed, because your species is approaching a threshold that requires understanding of its true origins, and because you, Raymond Torres, have the capacity to receive this information and share it with others. What truths? What origins? The being tilted its head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human. You have spent your life teaching evolution, natural selection, the slow progression of life from simple to complex. You believe humans descended from earlier primates through random mutation over millions of years. That's what the evidence shows. The evidence shows adaptation. It shows change over time, but it does not show the whole truth, because the whole truth has been deliberately hidden. Raymond felt something shift inside him, fear giving way to curiosity, the same curiosity that had driven him to become a scientist in the first place. Hidden by whom? By those who benefit from humanity not knowing its true nature, by institutions that would lose power if humans understood what they really are, and I must confess, by my own kind, who were not sure your species was ready for full disclosure. And now you think we're ready? Now we think you have no choice. The threshold approaches. Humanity will either awaken to its true identity or destroy itself. There is no middle path remaining. Raymond took a step forward, then another. The fear was still there, but the need to know was stronger. Show me then. Show me what's been hidden. Show me where we really came from. Are you certain? Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Your understanding of humanity, of yourself, will be permanently altered. I've spent 2 years not knowing anything for certain, doubting everything I believed, watching my son's body lowered into the ground, while my rational mind told me he was simply gone. Raymond's voice hardened. I'm ready for truth, whatever it is. I'm ready to understand. The being studied him for a long moment. Those dark eyes seemed to see through him, into him, measuring something Raymond couldn't name. Very well, but not here. I will take you to a place where the records are kept, where you can see for yourself how the first human came to be, and why that knowledge changes everything. Take me? Take me where? To a vessel in orbit around your moon. It contains archives that span hundreds of thousands of years, archives that document humanity's true origin. Raymond's heart hammered. Leave Earth? Go into space with an alien being he had met moments ago? How do I know I can trust you? How do I know this isn't some kind of trap? You don't. Trust is always a choice made without complete information. But consider this. You came here tonight because something called you. You didn't run when you saw me because something told you to stay. That something is the part of you that already knows the truth and is ready to remember it. Raymond looked back toward the trail, toward the cabin, toward the life he had been living, the questions that had no answers, the grief that had no resolution. Then he looked at the craft, at the being, at the possibility of finally understanding. What about my body? Will I survive the journey? The journey will take no time at all by your perception. You will return to this exact spot within minutes of leaving, though you will have experienced hours of revelation. Your body will not be harmed. Raymond took a breath, then another, and then he made the choice that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about being human. Take me. Show me the truth about our origins. The being extended a long, slender hand. Come then, Raymond Torres. Come and see how humanity was truly created, and understand why you were never meant to know. Raymond took the hand. It was cool and smooth, like polished stone. Light engulfed him. And when his vision cleared, Earth was a blue marble hanging in the darkness below, and the truth about human origins was waiting to be revealed. The vessel was enormous. Raymond stood in what appeared to be an observation deck, a curved wall of transparent material, showing the Earth and Moon in stark relief against the blackness of space. His mind struggled to accept what his eyes were seeing. "We're actually in space," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is real." "It is real. You are currently in orbit approximately 200,000 miles from Earth, in a vessel that has served as a monitoring station for your species for over 300,000 years. 300,000 years. Raymond turned to face the being. Humans haven't even existed that long. Homo sapiens emerged maybe 200,000 years ago. That is what your scientists believe. The truth is more complex. Come. The archives will explain what words cannot. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and adjust as they moved, the walls glowing with the same soft blue-white light as the craft that had brought them here. Raymond saw other beings, some similar to his guide, others vastly different, shapes and forms that his brain couldn't quite process. Many civilizations cooperate in the observation and guidance of developing worlds. Earth has been of particular interest for a very long time. Why? What's special about Earth? You will understand soon. They entered a circular chamber dominated by a sphere of light in the center, roughly 15 feet in diameter. It pulsed gently, and Raymond could sense something within it. Information. Vast amounts of information waiting to be accessed. This is an archive node. It contains records spanning millions of years. I'm going to show you specific moments in humanity's history. Watch carefully. What you see will challenge everything you believe about your origins. The being touched the sphere, and the room dissolved around them. Raymond gasped. He was no longer in the chamber. He was standing on a vast plain under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. The landscape was prehistoric, untouched by civilization, and there, in the distance, he could see a group of creatures. They were humanoid, upright, using simple tools, but they weren't human, not quite. Their features were different. More pronounced brow ridges, smaller craniums, Homo erectus, Raymond's trained mind identified, or something similar. This is Earth approximately 300,000 years ago. These are your ancestors. Not fully human, but on the evolutionary path that would eventually lead to humanity. Watch what happens next. The sky changed. Lights appeared. Not stars, something descending. Multiple craft, similar to the one that had brought Raymond here, landing on the plain. Beings emerged, tall, luminous, similar to his guide but somehow more radiant. They approached the primitive humanoids who cowered in fear at first, then grew calm, as if something was soothing their terror. What are they doing? Initiating the project that would create your species. Raymond watched as the beings led several of the humanoids toward the craft, not violently, gently, almost tenderly. The primitives followed as if hypnotized. What you are about to see is the actual creation of the first true human, not through evolution alone, through intervention. The scene shifted. Now Raymond was inside some kind of facility, advanced beyond anything he could comprehend. The humanoids lay on tables, unconscious, while the luminous beings worked around them, with instruments that made no sense to his eyes. Your scientists believe humanity evolved through random mutation and natural selection. This is partially true. The base genetic material did evolve over millions of years. But the leap from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens was not natural. It was engineered. Engineered? Raymond felt his worldview cracking. You're saying humans were genetically modified? Created in a laboratory? Created through a fusion of evolved primate genetics and something else. Watch. One of the luminous beings approached a humanoid on a table. It placed its hands on the creature's head, and light flowed from its palms into the skull. Not physical light, something else, something that Raymond could somehow perceive directly. What you are seeing is the implantation of consciousness matrix. The physical brain was modified to receive it, yes, but the crucial element was not genetic, it was spiritual. A fragment of higher dimensional awareness was placed within each modified being. This is what you call the soul. Raymond's legs gave out. He sank to the floor of the vision. Though he knew it wasn't really a floor, his mind reeled. You're saying we have souls because aliens put them there? Not aliens in the way you imagine. Beings who exist at higher frequencies of consciousness. Beings who volunteered fragments of their own awareness to seed a new species with the potential for spiritual evolution. What you call the soul is not a religious fantasy, Raymond. It is literally a piece of higher dimensional consciousness experiencing physical reality through a biological vessel. The scene continued. Raymond watched the first modified beings awaken. They looked different now. Something in their eyes had changed, a light that hadn't been there before, an awareness. These are the first true humans. They carried within them the genetic modifications that allowed for advanced cognitive function and the consciousness matrix that gave them the capacity for spiritual growth. They were released back into the population, and over generations, their traits spread throughout the species. But why? Raymond asked. Why create us? What was the purpose? The vision shifted again. Now he saw the early humans in communities, building, creating, looking up at the stars with wonder, burying their dead with ritual and reverence, making art on cave walls. The universe's consciousness experiencing itself through infinite forms. Physical reality is a school where that consciousness can grow, learn, evolve. But certain types of growth require specific conditions: limitation, forgetting, the experience of separation from source. Raymond watched the humans struggle, hunt, fight, love, mourn their dead, create religions to explain what they couldn't understand. Earth was designed as an accelerated learning environment. The human form was created to allow consciousness to experience maximum contrast, joy and suffering, love and loss, connection and isolation. Through these experiences, consciousness evolves in ways that are not possible in higher dimensions where there is no limitation. So we're an experiment, a school project for higher beings? You are beloved children learning to become what your parents already are. The experiment, as you call it, is one of love, not detachment. Every consciousness that agreed to incarnate on Earth did so voluntarily, knowing the challenges that awaited, including your son. Raymond felt like he had been struck. Michael? What does Michael have to do with this? Your son is consciousness, eternal consciousness that chose to experience a brief human life and then return to its natural state. His death was not a tragedy in the larger sense. It was a graduation, a return home after completing a difficult assignment. Don't? Raymond's voice broke. Don't tell me my son's death was some kind of cosmic plan. Not a plan, a choice. Before incarnating, every consciousness chooses the broad parameters of its experience: length of life, key relationships, significant challenges. Michael chose a short but impactful life. He chose you as his father specifically because he knew his death would crack you open, would make you ready for exactly this moment. Tears streamed down Raymond's face. That's cruel. That's impossibly cruel. It seems so from the limited perspective of physical existence, but consciousness does not experience death as you do. For Michael, the transition was instant and painless. What you perceived as months of grieving, he experienced as the joy of reunion with his full self. He is not suffering, Raymond. He has never suffered. Only you have suffered, because you forgot that death is an illusion. The vision shifted once more. Now Raymond saw something that stopped his breath entirely. Michael, not as a ghost or a memory, Michael as pure consciousness, radiant and whole, existing in a dimension of light and connection that Raymond could barely perceive. And Michael was looking directly at him. Dad. The word wasn't spoken aloud. It came directly into Raymond's mind, carrying with it a wave of love so intense that he collapsed completely, sobbing on the floor of the vision. Michael, I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you. I couldn't. Dad, stop. The voice was gentle but firm. There was nothing to save me from. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm everything I was meant to be. And I need you to understand that because you have work to do. Work? What work? I don't care about work. I just want you back. I never left. I've been with you every moment since the accident. You just couldn't feel me because your grief was a wall. I've been trying to reach you, Dad, trying to help you understand. This meeting tonight, I helped arrange it. I asked them to find you, to show you the truth. Raymond looked up at the radiant form of his son. Why? Why does any of this matter? Because humans are waking up. The experiment, as they call it, is approaching its conclusion, and people need to know the truth about what they are. Not evolved animals struggling for survival, not sinners waiting for judgment. Divine consciousness choosing to experience limitation so they can grow. Children of light temporarily wearing bodies of flesh. You can help them remember, Dad. That's why you're here. The vision began to fade. Michael's form grew less distinct. Wait, don't go. I have so many questions. I need more time. You'll have time. I'll visit you in dreams. We can talk more. But right now, you need to see the rest. You need to understand why this truth was hidden and why it must now be revealed. Michael disappeared. Raymond found himself back in the archive chamber, the sphere of light pulsing before him, his guide standing nearby. Your son is correct. There is more you must understand. The truth about human origins has been suppressed deliberately, and the reason for that suppression is the most important part of what you will learn. Raymond wiped his face. His whole body felt hollowed out and filled again with something new, something that wasn't quite hope, but was no longer despair. Tell me, show me, I need to understand all of it. When humans were created, they were given two things: genetic capacity for advanced consciousness and the soul matrix itself. But they were also given something else, a forgetting, a veil that would prevent them from remembering their true nature. Why? Why make us forget? Because remembering would defeat the purpose. Consciousness cannot fully experience limitation while knowing it is unlimited. A game has no tension if the player knows it is just a game. The forgetting was essential for the learning to occur. The sphere showed new images: early human civilizations, Egypt, Sumeria, the Indus Valley, massive structures being built with technologies that shouldn't have existed, but some humans began to remember. Through meditation, through mystical experiences, through contact with beings like myself who occasionally intervened. These humans understood that they were more than physical creatures. They understood that consciousness survived death. They understood that reality was far more malleable than it appeared. Raymond watched as temples were built, priests trained, mystery schools established. This knowledge was kept secret, passed down through initiates. The masses were given simplified versions, religions that contained fragments of truth wrapped in layers of control. The full truth was considered too dangerous for ordinary people. Why dangerous? Because humans who understand their true power cannot be controlled. They do not fear death. They do not obey unjust authority. They do not consume endlessly to fill an inner void. They are free. And freedom is threatening to those who benefit from slavery. The images shifted to show religious institutions, political systems, economic structures, all built on the fundamental premise that humans were small, weak, sinful, and in need of external salvation. The suppression became systematic. Those who taught the true nature of humanity were silenced, called heretics, witches, madmen. The institutions that rose to power did so by keeping humanity ignorant of its own divinity. An ignorant population is easy to control. A population that knows it is made of the same consciousness as God is impossible to enslave. Raymond thought about his years teaching evolution, how the scientific worldview, for all its accuracy about physical processes, reinforced the idea that humans were just animals, biological machines with no inherent meaning or purpose. Even science became a tool for suppression? Not intentionally. Science emerged as a method for understanding physical reality, and it has been tremendously successful at that. But by focusing exclusively on the material, it created a worldview that denied the spiritual. It told humanity that consciousness was merely brain activity, that death was final, that meaning was illusion. This served the purposes of control just as effectively as religious dogma. So both science and religion have been keeping us from the truth, for different reasons, but with the same result. Yes, and now you understand why this moment is critical. Humanity has reached a point where the suppression is beginning to fail. Too many people are having experiences that contradict the official narratives. Too many are remembering their true nature despite the forgetting. The old systems of control are crumbling. The sphere showed the modern world people meditating, questioning authority, sharing experiences of expanded consciousness through technology that connected them across the globe. A choice is approaching. Humanity can complete its awakening and step into its role as a mature species, capable of joining the larger community of conscious beings in the universe. or it can retreat into fear, allowing those who benefit from control to establish new systems of suppression even more effective than the old ones. What determines which way it goes? Individuals like you, every person who remembers the truth and lives it, affects the collective field. Every person who chooses love over fear, connection over separation, empowerment over victimhood, shifts the balance. Critical mass is approaching. The scales are nearly even. What happens in the next generation will determine humanity's trajectory for millennia. Raymond stood in silence, processing everything he had seen and heard. The creation of humanity, the soul matrix, Michael alive and well in dimensions of light, the systematic suppression of truth, the approaching threshold. What am I supposed to do with all this? I'm a high school biology teacher on leave. I have no platform, no credibility. If I start talking about aliens and engineered humans and souls implanted by higher beings, people will think I've lost my mind. Some will. Others will recognize truth they have always known but couldn't articulate. You will not convince everyone. That is not your purpose. Your purpose is to be a voice for those who are ready to hear, to speak what you have witnessed, and let it find those meant to receive it. And what about Michael? Will I see him again? You will see him every time you choose love over fear, every time you act from awareness rather than ignorance. He is part of you, Raymond. He always has been. The consciousness that incarnated as your son chose that role specifically to help you grow. He is proud of you for being here, for being willing to see. Raymond felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of grief. They were something else entirely. How do I go back? How do I live a normal life after seeing all this? You don't live a normal life. You live an awakened life. It will not always be easy. The truth carries weight, but it also carries freedom. You will never fear death again. You will never feel truly alone again. And you will never doubt that existence has purpose and meaning. The being moved toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. It is time to return. But before you go, one final truth. The beings who created humanity did not do so as detached observers. They did it as parents, creating children. They love you, all of you. Every struggle, every triumph, every moment of confusion and clarity is witnessed with profound compassion. You are not abandoned experiments. You are beloved souls on a journey back to remembering what you have always been. Divine consciousness. Infinite. Eternal. Playing a temporary game of limitation so you can know yourself more fully. The sphere pulsed one final time. Light enveloped Raymond. Go now. Share what you have seen. And remember, you chose to be here. You chose to forget. And now you have chosen to remember. That choice is the most important one any human can make. Help others make it too. The chamber disappeared. The vessel disappeared. And Raymond found himself standing in the Red Rock Canyon, the first light of dawn painting the cliffs in shades of gold and amber. His guide was gone. The craft was gone. But the truth remained, burning inside him like a fire that would never go out. Raymond stood in the canyon as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the red rocks. His body felt different, lighter somehow, as if something heavy had been removed and something luminous had taken its place. He checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. He had left the cabin around 4:30. Less than 90 minutes had passed, yet he had experienced what felt like hours of revelation. The being had told him time would work differently. It hadn't been lying. The hike back to the cabin was surreal. Every rock, every plant, every bird calling in the morning air seemed charged with significance. Raymond understood now that consciousness permeated everything, that the separation between himself and the world around him was an illusion, that he was quite literally connected to all of it through the same source that had created humanity in the first place. When he reached the cabin, he sat on the porch and watched the sun climb higher over the red formations. He didn't know how long he sat there. Time had lost its urgency. Eventually, he went inside and began to write. Just like Marcus Chen in Peru, though Raymond would never know about that parallel, the words poured out of him as if they had been waiting his entire life to be released. Everything he had seen, everything he had been told, the creation of humanity, the soul matrix, Michael alive and radiant in dimensions of light, the suppression of truth, the approaching threshold. He filled notebook after notebook over the following days. He didn't eat much, didn't sleep much. The information inside him demanded to be recorded before any of it could fade. On the fourth day, his phone rang. His ex-wife, Patricia. They had divorced 5 years before Michael's death, worn down by Raymond's emotional distance and obsessive focus on work. The accident had brought them back into contact, united by grief, if nothing else. "Ray, are you okay? You haven't answered my calls in days. I was about to call the police." "I'm fine, Patricia. Better than fine. Something happened." "What kind of something? You sound strange." Raymond hesitated. How could he explain? But Patricia had known him for 30 years. She deserved honesty. "I saw Michael." Silence on the other end. Then carefully, "Ray, Michael is dead. You know that." "His body is dead. He isn't. I saw him, Patricia. I talked to him. He's okay. He's more than okay. He wanted me to tell you that he loves you and that his death wasn't meaningless." More silence. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "Ray, I think you need to come home. I think you need to see someone, a professional. What you're describing sounds like—" "I know what it sounds like. I've spent 2 years thinking I was losing my mind, but this was real. I can't prove it to you over the phone, but if you're willing to listen, really listen, I can tell you everything, and then you can decide for yourself." Patricia agreed to meet him when he returned to Arizona. It was the first of many difficult conversations Raymond would have over the coming months. 2 weeks after the encounter, Raymond drove back to Phoenix. He didn't return to his empty apartment. Instead, he went directly to Patricia's house, where they sat in her living room for 6 hours while he told her everything. She didn't believe him, not at first, but something in his demeanor had changed so profoundly that she couldn't dismiss it entirely. The haunted, hollow man she had watched deteriorate since Michael's death was gone. In his place was someone present, grounded, alive in a way she hadn't seen since before the accident. "Even if none of this is real," she said finally, "something happened to you, something that helped, and I can't argue with that." "It's real," Raymond said, "and I think, somewhere deep down, you already know it. Michael told me to tell you something specific. He said you'd understand." "What?" He said, "Tell Mom I found the butterflies." Patricia's face went white. Her hand flew to her mouth. "When he was little," she whispered, "he used to ask me where butterflies went in the winter. I told him they flew somewhere beautiful, where it was always warm and there were flowers everywhere. He was obsessed with finding that place. He used to draw pictures of it. I'd forgotten about that until just now." "He found it," Raymond said gently. "He wanted you to know." Patricia broke down completely. She wept in Raymond's arms for nearly an hour, grieving and releasing and opening to something she had refused to consider since her son's death. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "Tell me more," she said. "Tell me everything." Over the following months, Raymond and Patricia grew closer than they had been even during their marriage, united not by romance but by shared understanding of something most people would never accept. They supported each other as Raymond began to share his experience more widely. He started with a small online forum dedicated to unexplained experiences. He wrote a detailed account of what had happened in Sedona, expecting ridicule, prepared for dismissal. Instead, he received hundreds of responses. People who had experienced similar things. People who had always felt that the standard explanations for human existence were incomplete. People desperate to believe that consciousness survived death and that their lost loved ones still existed somewhere. Raymond responded to as many as he could. He shared what he had learned. He emphasized that he wasn't starting a religion or making claims to special authority. He was simply a witness, sharing what he had seen. 6 months after the encounter, Raymond returned to teaching. Not at his old high school. He couldn't go back to presenting evolution as the complete explanation for human existence, not when he knew it was only part of the story. Instead, he began teaching at a small alternative school that welcomed unconventional perspectives. His classes were part biology, part philosophy, part exploration of consciousness. He taught students about DNA and natural selection, but also about the mysteries that science couldn't yet explain. The origin of consciousness, the evidence for near-death experiences, the persistent human intuition that physical reality was not all there was. "I'm not asking you to believe anything," he told his students on the first day. "I'm asking you to question everything, including what I tell you, especially what I tell you. The only truth worth having is the truth you've examined for yourself." Word spread. Other teachers came to observe. Some dismissed him as a crank who had lost his way after personal tragedy. Others recognized something valuable in his approach. A few began incorporating similar themes into their own classes. 1 year after Sedona, Raymond published a book. Not through a major publisher. No mainstream house would touch something so far outside conventional acceptability. He self-published, expecting it to disappear without notice. Instead, it spread. Slowly at first, then faster. Passed from reader to reader. Discussed in online forums. Quoted in podcasts that explored alternative perspectives on human nature. Within a year, it had sold over 50,000 copies without a single traditional marketing effort. The book was called The First Human, What We Were Never Meant to Know. It contained everything Raymond had witnessed, presented not as fact, but as testimony. He included his credentials as a biologist, his initial skepticism, his gradual opening to possibilities he had spent his career dismissing. He wrote about Michael, about grief as a doorway, about the choice between remaining asleep and choosing to remember. Reviews were polarized. Scientists called it pseudoscientific nonsense. Religious critics called it dangerous heresy. But thousands of readers called it the most important book they had ever encountered. Letters poured in from people whose lives had been changed by reading it. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago," one letter read. "I've been living in darkness ever since. Your book didn't take away the grief, but it gave me hope, real hope, for the first time since she died. Thank you for having the courage to share what you experienced." Letters like that kept Raymond going when doubt crept in, when he wondered if he had imagined everything, when the academic establishment dismissed him and former colleagues crossed to the street to avoid speaking with him. 2 years after Sedona, Raymond began giving talks, small gatherings at first, living rooms and community centers, people who had read the book and wanted to hear more. He told his story. He answered questions. He made clear that he wasn't a guru or a prophet, just a man who had seen something and felt compelled to share it. The gatherings grew larger. Conference halls, eventually invitations from other countries. Raymond traveled to Europe, South America, Asia, speaking to thousands of people who hungered for exactly what he offered, permission to believe that there was more to existence than material science acknowledged. He dreamed of Michael regularly now, not grief dreams, visitation dreams. They would meet in landscapes of light and talk, as they had when Michael was alive. Father and son, reconnecting across the veil that Raymond now understood was far thinner than most people realized. "You're doing well, Dad," Michael told him in one dream. "The ripples are spreading faster than we hoped." "I miss you," Raymond said. "Even knowing you're okay, I still miss having you here." "I know. That's part of the deal, the missing. It's how love expresses itself across dimensions. But it won't be long, Dad. Time is different here. For me, it will be like you stepped out of the room for a moment and then stepped back in. We'll be together again, I promise." Raymond woke from those dreams with tears on his face and peace in his heart, a combination he had never thought possible. 3 years after Sedona, Raymond stood before his largest audience yet, a conference on consciousness and human potential, held at a major university that had once been the heart of materialist skepticism. Times were changing, the old paradigms were crumbling, and Raymond Torres, former high school biology teacher, was being asked to address some of the most distinguished minds in the world. He looked out at the crowd, scientists, philosophers, spiritual seekers, curious skeptics, all of them wanting something that the conventional worldview couldn't provide. 3 years ago, he began, I was a broken man. My son had died. My faith in everything I believed had collapsed. And in a canyon in Arizona, I encountered something impossible that showed me the truth about where we come from and what we really are. He paused, meeting eyes throughout the auditorium. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to tell you what I witnessed and let you decide for yourself what it means. Because that's the only way truth has any value. Not accepted on authority, but recognized through your own direct experience. He spoke for 90 minutes. When he finished, the applause was not universal. Some sat in skeptical silence. Some walked out. but many rose to their feet, responding to something that transcended intellectual agreement, something that felt like remembering. After the talk, a woman approached him, young, perhaps Michael's age, tears streaming down her face. "My brother died last year," she said. "I've been so lost, but listening to you, I felt him. I actually felt him with me. Is that crazy?" "It's not crazy," Raymond said gently. "It's remembering. He's still there. They all are. The ones we've lost. They're just in a place we can't see yet. But we will. Someday, we'll see them all again." The woman embraced him, a stranger holding another stranger, united by grief, transformed into hope. It happened after every talk now. People desperate for permission to believe that death wasn't the end, that love survived, that existence had meaning. Raymond gave them that permission, not through doctrine or dogma, but through testimony, through the simple act of sharing what he had seen and letting it resonate with what people already knew in their hearts but had been taught to deny. The work continued, the ripples spread, and somewhere in dimensions of light, a young man who had chosen a short life and a devastating death watched his father become exactly what he had always been meant to be. A bridge between worlds, a voice for the forgotten truth, a reminder that humanity was not an accident, not a cosmic joke, not a meaningless flicker of consciousness in a dead universe, but children of the infinite, divine sparks temporarily clothed in flesh, playing a game of forgetting so they could experience the joy of remembering, and one by one, they were starting to remember. Raymond Torres spent his life teaching evolution as the complete explanation for human existence. He believed we were nothing more than clever animals, products of random mutation and blind natural selection. Then he lost his son, and everything he thought he knew collapsed. What he discovered in that Arizona canyon changes everything. You are not an accident. You are not a meaningless arrangement of atoms, briefly aware, before dissolving back into nothing. You are consciousness itself, infinite and eternal, temporarily wearing a human body so you can experience growth that is not possible in the unlimited realms you came from. The soul is real, not a religious fantasy, not wishful thinking, a literal fragment of higher dimensional awareness placed within you at the moment humanity was created. You carry divinity inside you. You always have. You simply forgot, because forgetting was necessary for the game you chose to play. Those you have lost are not gone. They have simply returned to the fullness of what they always were. They watch you. They love you. They wait for the moment when you will join them again. And from their perspective, that moment is barely a heartbeat away. This truth was hidden from you, deliberately, systematically. Because people who know what they really are cannot be controlled. They do not live in fear. They do not give their power away to institutions that profit from their ignorance. They are free. And freedom terrifies those who have built empires on the slavery of unconscious humanity. But the suppression is failing. Too many people are waking up. Too many are remembering what they were made to forget. The threshold approaches when humanity will either step into its true identity as divine consciousness in physical form, or retreat into new systems of control even more effective than the old ones. Which future manifests depends on choices being made right now. Your choices. Every time you choose love over fear, remembering over forgetting, connection over separation, you tip the balance toward awakening. You become part of the solution. So I ask you, does any of this resonate? Have you always felt that the story you were told about human origins was incomplete? Have you sensed that you are more than just a body, more than just a brain, more than what materialist science insists you must be? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about your experiences, your questions, your moments of remembering. You might be surprised how many others feel exactly the same way. And if you want more stories like this one, stories that reveal what has been hidden and awaken what has been sleeping, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. You are not an evolved animal struggling to survive on an insignificant rock in an uncaring universe. You are a child of the infinite, playing a game of limitation, slowly remembering your way back home. And now, perhaps, you have begun to remember.